Good evening. Welcome to Lyerly Online. Hope y'all are doing good. Hope everything is going well. I'm actually recording this um, Tuesday night, so I just wanted to go ahead and get this recorded. I just want to thank y'all so much for your prayers during this time. With my family and everything. But again, this is Tuesday night, so um, yeah, I don't know what's happened tomorrow, or today, or whatever we want to call it. But anyhow, a couple announcements. Um, Chattooga County schools are ate up with COVID right now, and to the point that they've shut down. They're sending kids home for 2 weeks, and we are going to suspend children's ministries for 2 weeks as well. So as long as the school systems are out, we're gonna suspend children's ministries. So if you have kids that participate in our children's ministry, we're gonna suspend those for 2 weeks, so that we can kind of let the. I feel like just through prayer time and everything else, just if the high school is, or if the schools are doing this to try to you know do what they're trying to do, it's kind of bad citizenship on our part to continue getting these kids together, and then B, it's a little bit irresponsible. So we're gonna pump the brakes on the kids programs for a little while, for about 2 weeks until the schools kind of get back, and then we're gonna back full steam ahead with the kids programs. Also, I want you to keep in mind that Sunday night we are having a called business meeting to discuss um, putting Eric and Leanna on as paid positions as youth pastors, or youth directors, I should say. And also, something else we'll be discussing is kind of the parameters about how we're going to handle paid employees, and how staff members are going to be kind of handled as far as administrative functions. But anyhow, again, thank y'all so much. Thank y'all so much for the prayers. Hope the Hungry yesterday, awesome time. We had uh, 40 some odd come through. I forgot the total number. Uh, or today. Okay. Hope for the Hungry today. Yeah, it's still today. Hope for the Hungry today. We had 40 some odd come through, which was a good number. I think we had three salvations, or three professions of faith, which is awesome. And I'm going to tell you, God's working, God's moving, and as a pastor, I am privy to see all the ways in which God is moving. Which sometimes, sometimes you're not always privy. As just church member, you're not privy to all the ways God is moving. But as a pastor, uh, I'm not privy to all the ways God's moving, obviously, but I'm privy to a bunch of them, and I see a lot of ways God's moving, and God's moving in things that a lot of people right now don't see, but are going to come, that will come to fruition. It'll be out in the open at some point. But anyhow, join me in prayer as we start off in prayer. Lord, we come before you, and I just want to thank you so much for this time. And God, again, um, I just want to thank you for today. I want to thank you for the ministries that went on today, and I want to thank you for the faithfulness that you showed today, the lives that were changed today, and hope for the hungry and elsewhere. And again, God, you're such a good God, such a great God, and Lord, we thank you so much for all your goodness and all your graciousness. And God, right now, I just pray that obviously, I pray for my family. It's Tuesday night, and God, we're touch and go with Dad. And by the time this airs, I don't know what's actually going to be have taken place. But God, I trust you in whatever it is. And Lord, again, just thank you so much for your many, many blessings right now as we, get ready to kind of delve into some more themes in the Bible. God, I just want to thank you for this, and I want to thank you for how you consistently will take things that were meant for evil and make them good. And Lord, again, you're such a good God, such a great God. We love you. We give you all the honor, glory, and praise in Christ's name. Amen. So as I kind of touched on, we're going to continuing on talking about themes that run through the Bible. Oh man, I really, really was wanting to get done with the How to Study the Bible study, and I didn't. I'm still going to be trying to work on it. I'm still going to be trying to get it done. But man, I didn't get it done. And I've really been wanting to get that. And so I'm going to continue working on it, even though I'm back in school. I'm back. My semester has started back. I'm going to continue working on that as much as I can. And in the meantime, we might do some other little studies here on Wednesday night. But I didn't get it done. I was disappointed in myself. I made a good licking on it, but I didn't get it done. So we're continuing in our studies on themes, and tonight we're going to be talking about how God will use, how God will turn something that was meant for evil and use it for good. And this is a theme that we see repeated through the Bible, and God does it a lot. And I brought it up. I almost didn't even use this one because there's a lot that goes with it, but there's not a whole lot to talk about it. It's God, basically it is God taking something that was meant for evil and turning it around for good, and He does it all the time. It's just this might be kind of short, and I say that every time, and it ends up being 30 minutes. Oh, and how do y'all like? So I got me a new microphone, and so I don't have to have this thing all up in my face anymore. But now I need something like right here to, kind of fill that up. But, yeah. So, and the reason being is because like with this thing, like with this one, like if I lean way back, the audio in theory should stay about the same. But with this, I'm going to cut this off real quick. And turn this one on. So with this one, if I'm leaning up real close, then it sounds a little different, and then if I'm back here, it sounds a little different, and I'm back here, it sounds different. So hopefully, with this one, no matter where I'm at in relation to the microphone, I'm still sounding the same. So I hope it sounds good. But anyhow, I'm always trying to make these live streams a little bit better, because if you've got to watch this from a computer, or from your telephone or from whatever, I want it to be, if you can't be here, I want it to be the best possible quality, and something to kind of keep you where you're not struggling through watching something. So anyhow, let me figure out what in the world I'm doing. I want top quality, blah, 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 and then I forget what I'm doing. God using evil for good. Again, a theme that we see all through the Bible. This is going to be pretty short tonight, because as it does run all the way through the Bible, and God does use it all through the Bible, that God uses evil and turns it into good. Just the examples, I could go through and just list every example of it and bore you to death, but I really want to kind of focus more on how He does it and what have you. So during the fall of man, God, we see this like absolute terrible thing happen where Adam and Eve sin. It's the fall of man, and like I said, absolute terrible thing that happens. And immediately, God is already working a plan. God is already developing a redemptive plan. God is already figuring out, how am I going to work this evil thing for good? And, He tells, as He's telling Eve, He says, that I'm going to put strife between your seed and the serpent's seed. Or He's telling the serpent this actually. I'm going to put strife between you and the woman, and her seed is going to, okay, you know what? I'm just going to read it. I'm going to look it up because now I can't remember exactly how it goes, and I don't want to tell y'all something that's not right. So I'm just gonna read it. Um, Genesis chapter 3 verse 17. No, excuse me. Genesis chapter 3 verse 14. And it says, and God said to the serpent, because you have done this, you are cursed more than all the cattle, and more than every beast of the field, and on your belly you shall go, and you shall eat dust all the days of your life. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed, and he shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. So immediately after the fall of man, immediately after things go south big time, um, God is already putting a redemptive plan in place. God is already putting a plan in place to take what's evil and turn it out eventually for good. So we jump over to the post flood, and so after the flood, and again, all this evil comes into the world. It's so evil, God has to flood the earth. God does all these things, and then God reminds us of His goodness. God reminds us of His promise with God's rainbow, the rainbow and the bow, and to remind us that even though that I will never flood the earth again, and although all these terrible things happen, and God had to destroy what He had made, He works it out for good because there's a remnant that is saved. There's Noah and his family that is saved, and God works this what ended up being a completely evil world, and He works it out for His good through Noah. And the symbol of that, if you would, is God's rainbow. We come into the Tower of Babel, and I throw this in here because this gets important a little later, because we see a situation that is kind of similar to this in the New Testament, but we've touched on this before, that God, when Noah and his sons come off the ark, God tells them, hey, go be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth. I think we touched on this last week, or the week before last, actually. And they come to Babel, and instead of going and filling and multiplying and doing what God told them to do, they say, you know what, this looks good here. We're going to settle, and we're going to build a tower lest we be scattered all over the earth. And that's what they do. And God takes what's evil, them being disobedient, and He scatters His people to fulfill that purpose. And so He takes what's evil and works it out for what is good in pretty dramatic fashion. And in that, we have all the nations of the world. We have the languages. We have the base languages that all of our modern languages come from. The book of Job. So the core message, the core theme of the book of Job is God taking what's evil, or I say it's the core theme. It's one of the core themes of the book of Job, of God taking what's evil and working it out for good. So God taking even all the pain and the suffering of Job and working it out for good, and restoring Job back to what he once had. Something interesting that we see in the book of Job is that Satan is constrained to only be able to do what God allows him to do. Here, anything that Satan does, he has to get permission from God to do. God has to give him permission to do things. And so, even though we see the powers of Satan and working our world, and we look at what's going on around us, and we go, oh my goodness, this is just demonic influences everywhere, we still take peace in the knowing that they cannot do anything that God that they're not going to be able to overstep their boundaries, I guess would be the best way to say it. They're not going to be able to do anything outside of what God is saying. You can do this, you can do this, you can do this, but you can't There's things that God's saying you can't do. And so we can take heart in that. We can take heart in that. We can pray, God, protect me from the demonic forces. God, protect me from, these demons that are around me, that are trying to do me harm, that are trying to derail me, that are trying to derail my faith, that are trying to to whatever they're trying to do to me, to destroy me, to break me, to make me doubt you, to make me sin against you, or to, not to make me, but to cause me, to influence me to sin against you. And I don't think we pray enough like that. I really don't. And that's something lately in my own prayer life. I've been more focused more on the spiritual warfare aspect of my prayer life, of God, these demons, that the spiritual warfare, and these demons that are around me, these demons that the adversary is placed to stop me, to hinder me, to try to lead me into temptation, or try to trick me, or try to lie to me, try to deceive me, try to steal my joy. These demons that are around me, these demonic forces, God bind them, God stop them, God send them away from me, render them powerless. Don't allow them to do the things that they want to do, because God ultimately can hinder them, can limit them. And I think that's something that's missing from our prayer life. That we, especially as Westerners, we want to pray for a whole lot of things, and Paul and the apostles tells us, spiritual warfare is a thing, and spiritual warfare needs to be a part of our prayer life, and I think that we need to bring that back into our prayer life, and not only praying, God bless me, God, but God, put a muzzle on these demons. Put these demons that are sent to destroy me. Put them on a short chain, and don't let them do the things that they want to do. Because ultimately they have to obey you. Ultimately they are under that, even though they're evil, and even though they're opposing to you, even though they're opposite of you, they're still under you. They're still under authority, and they can't do anything if you say that they can't. And so say they can't. Say they can't. Do that for me, God. Say that they can't. It's kind of a scary way to pray, because we want to pretend, in the Western world, we want to pretend that spiritual warfare is not happening. We want to pretend that we don't have demons that are around us, that are influencing us. And the head in the sand approach will not make these demonic forces leave you alone. They won't make them go away. So we do need to address them, and we need to address them through prayer. And it's weird, and it's scary, and all these things, but it's there. It's bottom line, it's there. The Bible tells us it's there. The Bible tells us that our struggle is not against flesh or blood, but it's against powers and principalities. You can stick your head in the sand about that if you want to, but we need to be praying, and that's how we need to be praying. And that's something in my own prayer life lately that has convicted me, that I've been more in depth to pray about, and pray in regards of. But again, one of the things that we see here in Job about God using evil to fulfill His purpose, or not using evil to fulfill His purpose per se, but taking something that's evil and fulfilling His purpose through that, or out of that, or turning what's evil into good. We see that in the book of Job. We see that Job loses everything, and God makes a book of the Bible about it, that helps us understand, why do bad things happen, and B, He restores Job and gives him even more. The patriarchs, and kind of the big one. Okay, so the big one, the big one that we see this out of, and it's really like blatantly brought up, is Joseph. And right at the end of the book of Genesis, and we have Genesis 50, verse 20. It says, and so just to paint the picture of what's going on here, Joseph, and all of his brothers' father has died, and after they go and they bury Jacob, and Joseph's brothers start kind of like, all right, so now that Jacob's dead, now that Dad's dead, is Joseph about to seek revenge on us? Is the only reason Joseph hasn't sought revenge on us thus far is for the sake of Dad? And this kind of conspiracy theory between the brothers gets back to Joseph, and Joseph is like, guys, you have nothing to worry about. And then he makes this statement in verse 20. He says, "But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring about as it is this day to save many people alive." And basically what he's saying is like, when y'all did this, you meant it for evil. And you meant to sell me into slavery. You meant this to be a torment to me. You meant to evil for me. But God has taken this evil thing and turned it into something good. And look at all the lives that were saved. Look at where the elevated position of our family. Look, we've got it made, guys. And so I'm not mad at you. It's Joseph here is at the end of his life understanding a very significant truth of how I had to go through these hard times to fulfill God's purpose, and God's purpose was ultimately for good for us, and I just had to experience some evil along the way. And that's something that through this I want us to understand, and that helps us cope with why do bad things happen? Well, bad things happen because good things are going to happen, and God allows you to experience bad things because he has good things in store for you. And those bad things that are happening, he's going to turn them around and turn them into blessings. And we believe in that, and we trust in that. And it might not even be a blessing in your life, but it might be you got to turn it into a blessing for someone else. You know what? And if I can be a blessing to somebody else, hey, I'm perfectly good with that. So I had some experience with this today, in fact, of something that has plagued me for a while that has actually today turned into a huge blessing for somebody. So, but anyhow, during the conquest time, another big example of this is the Battle of Ai or Ai or Ai or I really don't know. I really don't know. Probably nobody today really knows how they pronounce this city's name. But anyhow, if you remember back to my sermon series way back when we talked about the conquest, and so after the Battle of Jericho, big win, Israelites fist bumping, yeah, what's up? We're big win. Well, what they didn't know is they had one soldier that went into Jericho and stole some items. And the problem is, apart from stealing just being wrong, God had told them, listen, don't take anything from the city. But this soldier did. He took some Babylonian wardrobes. I forgot exactly. I think some silver maybe. I know Babylonian wardrobes. I know that's one thing that he took, and he took some other things. And because of that, God kind of placed a judgment on Israel. So they go up to the next city, a city called Ai, and they scout it out. And they're like, yeah, this Ai is going to be a layup. So we're only going to send so many soldiers up there. It's nothing to it. And they lose, and they're chased off, and they have to retreat. And Joshua's like, hey, what's up? And he finds out about the sin of Achan, or this soldier named Achan. And they have to take care of that. They deal with it. And then how God takes something that was evil and turns it out for good is so now God's like, hey, listen, whenever y'all go back to Ai, I want you to take a certain amount of soldiers and go up there and attack it just like you were going to do, and then retreat just like you did. And the men of Ai is thinking that the same thing's happening, but then the rest of the army is behind the city. And whenever the whole army of Ai comes out, y'all come in and take over the city. So God uses their first defeat in the way that he ends up as part of the plan to actually conquer the city. So again, God using something that was bad, something that was a defeat, and turning it into a victory um, in the battle of Ai during the conquest. The Judges. Old Samson, and this is a kind of an event that most people know. Samson, um, not the most wholesome person in the world. Definitely not the most wholesome Israelite judge ever. Kind of a roughneck. Well, very much so a roughneck. But Samson, at the end of his life, is captured by the Philistines. His eyes are gouged out. His hair has been cut. He loses his super strength, and he is chained to pillars in a Philistine temple. And he prays to God. He says, "If you give me strength one more time, I'll bring the house down. I'll bring the house down on top of everybody." And so what was evil, and Samson's whole life, at the end of it there, God uses it. I hate to say for good that he killed a whole bunch of Philistines, but this is God's judgment upon the Philistines, and so he used that, and in a pretty traumatic way. Jumping all the way to the exile, and again, there's a whole bunch of little examples all through here, and I just picked a handful of them because again, the whole lesson could just be little example after little example of how God has done this. But I really kind of want to get it more to the end of this, and how it applies to us, and how it really applies more so to the church. But in the exile, God actually uses Babylon. God uses a pagan nation to, and I brought this up in another one of these, but he uses a pagan nation to judge Israel. And he uses this pagan nation to take Israel into exile and judge them, and I hate to say it, chasten them. I mean, God says, "I will," in the covenant, He says, "I'll chasten my children. I will discipline my children." So He uses a pagan nation to do this disciplining, and then whenever He brings them back, the Israelites really, at this point, they stick to the covenant. After the exile, they come back, they rebuild the temple, they really get on the right track, but then they get a little crazy with it. So the Messiah, the huge one here is the crucifixion. I mean, I'm sure Satan thought he won. That God used something that was terrible, the crucifixion of Christ, to redeem all of us. And then through the resurrection, He shows His power in this. And so something that was definitely meant for evil, and this is the biggest example. This is the biggest glaring example of this. And this is what all the rest of them kind of point to, a way that all the rest, especially Joseph, especially that comment by Joseph, is definitely a foreshadowing of this, of how the crucifixion is something that Satan definitely meant for evil. The Jews definitely meant for evil. The Romans that were involved in it, the Roman soldiers, definitely meant it for evil. However, God turned it around for the most glorious thing ever, which is working His redemptive plan. The redemptive plan that He's talking about in Genesis chapter 3 at the fall of man is materialized here in the crucifixion, something that they meant for evil that God worked out for good. This is the big one. So then during the early church, we see this. We really start seeing this. We really start seeing this a lot now. So Paul's the first kind of big one I want to bring up is Paul's persecution of the early church pushes them out of Jerusalem, and so the apostle Paul is actually spreading Christianity before he even converts to Christianity, because what happens is the Jews or the Christians are in Jerusalem, and they spread Jerusalem, and they spread Christianity all throughout Jerusalem, and now they're supposed to go into Judea and throughout all the ends of the earth. Well, they don't. They stay in Jerusalem, and it takes the martyrdom of Stephen, and it takes the persecution of Saul's. I should have put Saul here. Which really his name never changed. Gentiles call him Paul, Jews call him Saul. So Saul's persecution of the church actually is what pushes the church outside of Jerusalem. It's actually what pushes the church out more further into Judea and out into Samaria and out into these other places. And so God takes Paul's persecution and uses it for good. And so what's funny is this is kind of a parallel of the Tower of Babel. God tells Noah and his sons, go fill the earth and go be fruitful, fill the earth. And they come to one city. They decide they're not going to do that. And God scatters them throughout the earth. God tells his disciples, go therefore into all nations, making disciples. You know the rest of it. And they say, cool. So they win Jerusalem, and they're like, hey, we're here. We won Jerusalem, and they're not going anywhere else. And so God allows persecution to happen to start scattering them, to start pushing them outside the walls of Jerusalem and further into Judea and further into Samaria and what have you. Paul and Silas, their imprisonment, which is bad, but it ends up resulting in the salvation of the Philippian jailer and his entire family. The Philippians, this is kind of the reason I started not to even do this, because they were just, I feel like, I hope this hasn't felt too redundant, but I started kind of going through it and I was like, this is kind of feeling kind of redundant. But it's, this is what God does, and he does, and it's a theme, so I guess it is going to be redundant. Again, Paul in his letter to the Philippians is saying, hey, I'm in prison, but it's turning out good because of my imprisonment, the gospel is getting out there more and more. And then again, Paul's imprisonment towards what we're plugged for Sunday night, what we're talking about in Acts on Sunday nights. And I'm gonna say, I'm gonna say this. If you didn't get a chance to watch last Sunday night's lesson on Acts, it was pretty good. It was, sometimes there'll be sermons that I think are just going to be bangers, that I think they're just going to be awesome, and then for me, they fall flat. And then there's sometimes that I'll do one and I'm going to be like, yeah, and then it's like, man, that turned out really good. Last Sunday night was good. Last Sunday night was pretty good. As I was delivering it, I was like, man, this is better than I thought it was going to be. And then I watched it and I was like, yeah, watch last Sunday night. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. And it's not a me thing, I promise you. It definitely was not a me thing, because whenever I was kind of going through it, I was like, yeah, this is going to be a stand-up single at best. Okay, so me and my old pastor used to talk about sermons as like base hits or doubles or triples or home runs, whatever. And I was like, yeah, this is going to be a base hit at best. And then it ended up being a solid stand-up double. So anyhow, I'm on a rabbit trail. I pride myself on not going on rabbit trails when I'm preaching. But Wednesday nights, fair game. Well, we're gonna chase rabbits all over the place. But that's okay. You know why? Because you can just pause it and fast forward it or whatever. Paul's imprisonment, and this is how we got on this. This is what we're talking about in Acts. But Paul's imprisonment leads to him being able to talk to a lot of and share the gospel with several influential leaders of the time. Festus, which we talked about last Sunday night, Felix, Herod Agrippa, the Sanhedrin, eventually Nero. He eventually goes to Rome and talks to the emperor. So I mean, his imprisonment, although it was bad, God worked it out for good, because he was able to get the gospel to a bunch of like really important people. Now they didn't respond to it, but that's on them. So in the church age, I could go through all of church history and tell you several things, from the Protestant Reformation, how the Catholic Church, what was evil is how the Catholic Church was kind of persecuting people and taking advantage of people. God used that for good for the Protestant Reformation. I could do all kind of things of how God has done that. But my big question is, what about your own life? I know that I have stories in my own life where things that were bad and God turned them around for good. And speaking of my dad, and I remember the last time that I was kind of in this position of thinking that I may lose my dad, and he had I got a phone call from my mom and saying that dad had been in a bad accident, and he flipped his truck, and that just the injuries of crack, fractured skull, swelling on the brain, bleeding on the brain, or a clotted artery, punctured lungs, punctured collapsed lungs, a lot of internal bleeding, and in law enforcement, when we go to an accident and there's any one of those injuries present, we work the accident as if it's going to be a fatality. And so I told Tammy, I was like, Dad's not going to make it. Well, Dad pulled through, and he was in a coma for a couple months, but he pulled through, and it really turned my dad's life around, and really changed my life, or changed Dad's life, and he really got serious about his faith, and so what God meant for evil, or what, I rebuke that. What Satan meant for evil, God turned it around for good, in a big way, and in our own lives, you can see that. You can see where you were going through something at the time, and it was so hard, and it was so difficult, and it was so awful, and God, why am I going through with this? God, why is this happening? God, why am I dealing with this? God, why does this have to be this way? God, why can't you just take this from me? And if we get on the other side of it, and we look back and we start seeing the results of that, and we start seeing the other end of it, and you go, okay, I see why this had to happen. I see how God was taking that and working it out for good, working it out for, what was meant for evil, He worked out for good, and I see that. And so, this is something God is in the business of, and He does a lot. And as I said before, as you're going through things, just know that sometimes you're going through bad things because you've got good things around the corner. You're going through hard times because He's going to take these hard times and work them out for good times. So He's going to take these hard times and the what we consider a curse and turn it into a blessing. And that's what we trust God in. And God is so faithful to do that, and He does it. And you know what? In this life, you may never see that. You may never see that blessing in this life. However, I guarantee you'll see it in the next life. I guarantee you it'll be there in the next life. I hope y'all take some. I know and I hope y'all take some encouragement from this, because I know everybody's going through just nonsense right now, just mess right now, and all this stuff that's going on, and this is this is another reason why as Christians we really can't get too worked up with what's going on in the government. We really can't get too worked up on it. And yeah, I mean, it's crazy and it's bad, but God's gonna work it out for good. God's in there, and He's seeing what's going on, and he's working it out for good. And, all these evil things that Satan's trying to get rolling, God's just checkmate, check, like in chess when you win. Anyhow, God's got this, and whatever it is you're going through, God's going to work. God is in the business of working things out, working out evil for his own good. So take comfort in that. Take heart in that. That's where I'm at. That's the only place I can be. But anyhow, I love y'all. Keep praying for me. Keep praying for my family. And I'm going to keep praying for y'all. And hopefully I'll see y'all Sunday. I believe I will. Anyhow, I love y'all. Have a great evening. Be safe. And you know, let's keep each other in our prayers. And I'm gonna pray. Lord, we come before you, and God, just again, thank you so much for being so faithful to always work what Satan means for evil for good. And I just thank you so much for that. And God, I trust you in that. I trust that you'll do that. And God, just right now, just everybody watching, and God, I pray a special blessing on them. I pray a special blessing on my church family, and just how much they mean to me. And God, again, just keep us right in the middle of your will. Keep us right in the middle of what we need to be doing, where we need to be going. And God, just strengthen us, mobilize us, make us your army, make us your people. Lord, we love you. We give you all the honor, glory, and praise. In Christ's name, amen. Oh, I could have turned this to this. Well, y'all have a great day. Love y'all. I'll keep y'all posted on what's going on. And I'll talk with y'all later. Bye, everybody.